Hi, everyone. A quick note for this week's episode. This episode contains spoilers for Cinnamon Switch's Mice Tea game, including late narrative developments and twists. So please keep that in mind as you listen to this episode. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TFTuesday Podcast. My name is Zill. It's great to have you all back today for a very, very special episode. I'm very excited for the conversation that we're going to be having today with the development team behind Mice Tea. And before we get to that, just a quick note as always, that if you like the content that we produce, you can always support us on Patreon. Our Patreon is patreon.com/TFTuesdayPod. And you can not only get a chance to have your name in the credits, but also vote on some of the topics that we talk about on a weekly basis. We have a poll once a month, and you get to suggest options, and then you get to hear myself or Kalibra or whoever else that is guesting get to talk about said topic. So if that is of interest to you, please feel free to check out our Patreon. But enough about that. I am going to turn the floor over shortly to the development team for Mice Tea to talk a little bit about the visual novel and themselves and the work that they've put into it. So take it away.
Okay, intros. I'm Gunzel. I'm the developer of Mice Tea. I do all the coding. I did a lot of the initial outlining / story work.
So I'm KD, K Dynamo, KD for short, that's fine. I am they call me the lead artist, but I'm just the first artist on the project. But really, I did help create a lot of the character designs, as well as creating all the sprites for the characters, a couple of the CGs, but mostly just making sure all the characters look as cute as possible in all the different outfits that we picked them out in. Yeah. Go, Mira.
Hi, I'm Mira, the Transfer Mistress. I am a CG artist and sprite artist on, or sprite sketcher on Mice Tea.
And I'm Zoe. I am the producer and lead writer.
I'd love to hear, I guess, as a kind of an overall description, how would you describe collectively Mice Tea for the average person who maybe hasn't heard of it before?
4 distinct furry transformation stories duct taped together by a lovable protagonist named Margaret, who's very bisexual and
Yes, very fortunately Brazilian, I will say. I will just say off the bat, the Brazilian connection got to me, all, and I very much appreciated its inclusion. So, but yeah, I was curious to kind of hear a little bit more around the creation of the visual novel itself, and to kind of, I guess, start at the beginning, because it's a very distinct idea. There's a very clear premise and a clear story, and I was curious to know a little bit more, what sparked the idea that came to be Mice Tea, and if there was a specific trigger, that got the ball rolling.
Man, okay. I guess this is my court as the project inceptor. Let me see here. I'm trying to figure out how far back is relevant.
As far back
I guess
as you
we
think.
can. Huh? Okay. I can go pretty. So in like 2017, I think I played a visual novel called Student Transfer, and it was like I was looking for like a porn game that I don't know, was nice. And there's like a moment in it where I realized these characters were written by like human beings with like a sense of humor, and it like actually was funny and like kind of, and there were like some heartfelt moments. There's a lot of not good stuff in there, to be clear, but there's some heartfelt parts, and I'm like, that would be nice. What if I made porn that like didn't make me feel bad? Like, what if I made porn that like made me feel good and like was just kind of a nice and comfy experience? And I think at the time I was living with Heart Gear, who is our background artist, and I was like, and at the time we already wanted to make video games together. Like I've wanted to make video games like most of my life. I don't know, I was bit by the bug. But I also have a day job, so making video games is a lot of work, right? So I'm like, what's the easiest video game? Well, it would be nice to make a visual novel, and it would be nice to make something with like, what's the word? Like intrinsic motivation, the intrinsic motivation of, haha, I'm making a thing that makes me horny. Haha. It's a hobby that also I get a little extra out of. So I was like, we should make a porn game together, or like some kind of like gender bender thing together with Herkier. And she's like, yeah. And we tried a couple different things and it like didn't quite work. Like she also had all of her, like we both had like, we're both going in different directions, and also we had no idea how to run a project like collectively. So at a certain point I'm like, all right, this isn't working. Like maybe I'll try something else. And I think around that time, KD invited me to what convention was it?
Midwest Fur Fest.
Invited me to Midwest Fur Fest. He's like, you want to go to a furry convention with me? I'm like, I have anything better to do on a Saturday. Sure, dude, let's go. And for background, KD and I were college friends. We met in college. We have been friends ever since. We live in the same city. And I think we went there and we met the Changeling Tale developers. And we just like hung out in a room and like drew for a while. Like everybody just like drew pictures and we're just chilling, hanging out. They're talking about the visual novel they were making. And at the time, like I'm still like, my gears are spinning. I'm like, I want to make a video game. I want to make like some kind of visual novel. I want to make something small. And I think like on the drive home, I'm like, Katie, let's make a visual novel. And I'm like, I think that was the first time I engaged and went, oh, you do a lot of TF stuff. I'm like in the like TG space, but like I could do TF stuff probably. Like I could do furry stuff.
Yeah.
Like I'm normally in the gender stuff. So, I think we got back. We had a Google Doc where we just wrote out a bunch of ideas. And I think one of the first ones was like, let's have this bookish woman and she's drinking some tea and the tea turns her into like, I don't know, what's a good animal? Like a mouse? Yeah, okay. Mice tea. Oh, holy shit. That's a good name. Let's make this in 1 month. And it will be a glorified single sequence, like a single CG with narration of this woman TGing over time, and then it's over. And maybe a couple
TFing,
sprites.
but yeah.
Yeah. So I put something together, and Katie threw some sprites together, and it took a couple months. And it was complete shit. It was so bad. Oh my god. I am so embarrassed at my prior writing.
If I can say, like the art was like I felt like, so this was the first time I had drawn like a lot of humans in a while, and I was just like, oh man, how do I draw people now?
How do I draw
like,
guys especially?
I'm too good at drawing like cat girls and bunny people, and how do I draw guys? Like holy shit. Felix is a dude. I need to do something about that.
Yeah.
Like he can't just look like a girl, can he?
No.
Wink,
Little did
wink.
we know.
But it was the original thing that we put together was very much an like accelerated version of like, okay, this woman who apparently does not have any mirrors or
that was
doesn't-
important so she wouldn't notice that she was turning into a mouse. No mirrors.
Yeah, she has to never notice over the weekend that she's turning into a mouse, so that she can go back the next workday and her coworker can be like, "Oh man, you look like a mouse," and then she's like, "Oh man, I didn't know that. Also, I'm really horny now." And he's like, "Okay, well, let's do sexy stuff."
It's like an old CG where like he like touches her ears and she's like, "Oh yeah, touch my ears, please." And he's like, "Are you getting off to this?" And she's like, "I guess." And then it just kind of ends. And then we were going to turn him into a cat girl. But yeah, we got feedback from the Changeling Tale folks, and they told us the hard truths we needed to hear, and also I think part of that was like, okay, well, I'm not spending enough time with these characters to get attached to them. Also, like, cast is super small, like maybe add a couple other things, and like they're just kind of like seeding new ideas. And I'm like, okay, let's add a third character named Julia, and she's Margaret's college friend. And I think Katie's like, she'll turn into a red panda and like she's like a redhead. Like her original version was like a redhead.
It was she was going to be a fennec fox at first.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. She was going to turn into a fennec fox. There's a lot of cute old concept art of like proto Mice T or stuff like that. But and then I think there's a second one, and I had Margaret go to a laundromat because they're like, I think one of the commentaries like, you just have her sit in your house and she doesn't go out and do anything and have to hide her transformation. I'm like, damn it, you're right.
Yeah,
stuff
having
like
to
that.
Deal with the stress of transforming in a public spot.
Yeah.
That's what's really good.
But yeah, there's like another draft like that. And I think after that we were just like, okay, scrap this, we're starting over. And I think around that, and I think we like, then we found Narrowpon, right? Like Narrowpon appeared, and he's like, I want to do. Yeah, you go ahead on Narrowpon.
Okay, so Narrowpon is a dear friend that unfortunately we don't get to talk to a lot of these days. But he is a native Brazilian. He is a very gregarious and funny guy. And he was like, KD, I want to help with Mice T if I can, because I really like the idea and I think your characters are really cute. I said, all right, well, what if we make you the guy to help sketch out some of the CGs and the character interactions? He's like, all right. So I was like, okay, here's the cast that we have so far. Go ahead and draw them and see if like they feel right to you. And he drew them, and they were super fucking cute. And a lot of the look of the game is thanks to how Narrowpon drew certain characters, such as Margaret and Sylvia and Felix. So he was a major contributor to the beginning of the game in terms of art style. Unfortunately, as time went on, he had certain obligations in his own life that didn't let him to continue working on the project, but he will forever be remembered as a key part of the team.
And also, we weren't able to keep him on as a member of the full team, but we did bring him back for like a guest CG that was added late in development. You might remember for people who played the game, the kind of alternate Julian that comes towards the end. We brought him back to do that one, and it was a particularly cute example of his talents.
Very nice.
Yes.
Very nice.
Yeah. But at that point, it was like mid 2018. I think we're still trying to figure out what the plot is and like what the paths are going to be, and have some Google Docs trying to bang that out. And I think around that point, like, I don't remember how Zoe joined the project. I just know at some point Zoe appeared and was a part of the project now.
Well, we were in a server where we were in a mutual server with her, and we knew that she was a writer, and I think Zoe wanted to help. I don't want to speak for Zoe,
I don't recall if you had been talking to each other like, oh, this Zoe person's a decent TF writer, let's talk to her, or if I just like volunteered myself as like, hey, let me work for you, and just force myself onto the team that way. But yeah, it was early 2018 when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And thank God you did.
Yeah.
I actually am curious now. Were you talking about it, or did I just kind of just show up and say like, "Hey, I'll work for you," and you said, "Sure, why not?"
I honestly do not remember.
I think we I met Zoe through like her being a mod on every TF Discord, but I think the first like close interaction we had was like we both were like translating like Japanese comics on some Discord somewhere, or kind of interacting more closely there. But I think then we hung out on like our friend Britt, her server, Brittany TF. There we go.
Oh yeah.
And I think we were just talking about. We must have been talking about the game at various points, but I don't know. I think it's a thing where it just made sense. We were writing a visual novel, and Zoe's doing writing. I might have at least asked for advice or something. Either way, Zoe joined the team, and then we got an actual like full dedicated writer.
Mm-hmm. And as long as we're on the subject of people joining the team, it's very funny how Mira joined the team. And I think when this podcast comes out, it will be like less than 1 day, less than a year exactly to when she joined the team.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And what happened was she has monthly kind of request streams on Picarto, the kind of like, art streaming platform.
Yeah.
And everyone on the team, enjoyed her stuff, and we would all go on there and try and, enter the raffle and try and get a spot. And we entered, and I had no idea what to get from her. And like, I was just scrambling around trying to find something for Mira to draw. I was like, crap, I'll have her draw Gavin from the game. And so I threw it up there. I threw up all the refs, and it's and I gave it to you. And did I like give you a link to the game afterwards, or did you like independently look it up or something?
I think what happened was I asked, like, hey, I really love the design of this character. This character's so cute. What are they from? And then you probably gave me the link to it, and I was like, oh, cool. I'll check that out. And then, like, definitely not later that night, but later that week, I fucking needed something to, like, I needed to relax and play something. And I was like, oh, I'll check out that cute Mice T game. And I sat down, I downloaded it on my phone, and I started playing it, and I absolutely fell in love. I fell head over heels for this game. I played, like, I actually went away that weekend, and I spent the whole weekend getting caught up with the other routes and everything. The first route I played, I just, it was so good. And so I was like, this game is unfinished. I'm a TF artist now of decent repute. Not to brag, but I'm very proud of what I do, and people have acknowledged me.
Yeah.
So,
as you should be.
I was like, I wonder if there's some way I could also bully my way onto the team of this game.
Well, there is stuff that you're forgetting, and I don't know if this is embarrassing to bring up, but we were just talking about it because you mentioned how much you like the game.
Oh, right. Oh, God. I wanted to make a fan game. I wanted to make a Mice T unofficial sequel that takes place in the world after one of the endings. Oh, God, you told... Yes, that's how we started talking, me and Zoe.
Which ending was it? I gotta ask, which ending
was it?
It was
Felicia. It was the Felicia ending.
Okay.
I wanted to make a whole game that's just that, but with a new set of characters.
It was like a TF diner, like a 50s style, like girls on roller skates kind of diner kind of setting.
You are what you eat, I believe I called it.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, God, it's embarrassing now, but...
Okay, if it makes you feel any better, when I had finished that path, my first thought was, I wonder if they'd ever do a Brazzles spin-off. So I feel you there, is what I'm trying to say.
So independent of Mira thinking, can I bully my way onto this team? We on the team we had commissioned her to draw a comic of Gavin drinking the tea.
No, that was the
different.
Commissions. That's actually what I was going to get to, Katie.
Okay.
I
Sorry.
opened Commissions, and I was scrolling through, seeing all the names that were in my commissions, and I stopped dead when I saw Cinnamon Switch. And whatever your Gmail is, I forget if it was SinSwitch or if it was MiceT@Gmail. I forget. But it was... I froze and I was like, oh my fucking God. And immediately that went to the top of the commission list. I threw it right at the top and I was like, okay, I am going to absolutely knock this commission out of the park and hope that me showing off will get them to hire me to be a part of the game. And my evil master plan actually worked.
Yeah, so after that commission, we were just blown away at how fast your turnaround speed was.
Thank you.
That and how well you stuck to like everyone's like character model. Like, oh man, everyone's like super on model in this.
Except for the boobs.
Yeah, we were like, wow, Mira really knows how to draw our characters. And she's got like a really good intuitive understanding of all that. And we were just like, what if we asked Mira to come on? Because I was, at the time, it was myself and another team member, which we haven't really talked about yet, but I'm sure we'll get to. who are responsible for all the CGs in the game, and I am also a person with a day job. So having all of those CGs under my responsibility was it was daunting, to say the least.
It was an amount of work we probably would have never finished. In fact, yeah, it was like we kept thinking of CG ideas and like sketching those ends. And I don't remember when we brought in UBF, but we were like, okay, we at least need someone dedicated to sex scenes.
That was fairly early. I think that was like 2019, like about not too long after Neuropan.
I think it was probably like Neuropan left, and then we were like, okay, we need to fill that gap.
We need another like Southern Hemisphere artist to do the sexy scenes. She's from Australia.
Amazing.
But yeah, we were just like, okay, we need to bring Mira in to pick up some of the stuff that I can't possibly get to in time. And it is no exaggeration to say that she is the reason why Iced Tea is coming out this, like, before, 2030.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And also the reason why the game is not totally lopsided, because we did one route first and then realized, oh crap, we cannot keep up this like level of content per route, until we brought Mira on and said, okay, now everyone can have the same amount of CGs per route and everything's nice and balanced. Nice.
That's fantastic. I think you actually took out a few of the questions I was going to ask, which is great. We've covered a lot already. I guess I was curious then. So, I mean, you've touched on why you wanted to do a visual novel rather than simply writing a story, because the genesis came from video games, of course, and not just like writing a story. But when it comes to like writing and boarding for a visual novel broadly, like what challenges did you encounter that were specifically unique to visual novel creation?
I think one of the things that visual novels do is it does encourage you very much so to be efficient with your planning and writing and so on. Like every time we think of like, a scene to add or something, it's like, wait, do we need a new background for this? Do we really need this scene? I think our patrons have allowed us to be a little bit less kind of conservative than we might otherwise be. We have a lot of NPC sprites in the game for a visual novel, and part of that is because we allow our patrons to buy cameos, and that really allows us to kind of feel that we're being responsible. Okay, like we're making enough money to justify all these NPC sprites. But even in that case, we do really need to plan out, okay, like how many times can we use the sprite? How many times can we use this expression, this background, and so on. It leads us to do stuff like draw Margaret holding a box and then think, okay, how many different contexts in which can Margaret hold a box? Okay, we'll put cats in it this time. Now they have another reason to use this box expression again.
Yeah, starting out, it was a lot of just keep adding things to the pile with not a lot of regard for efficiency. And then the back half was like, oh God, here's this long tail of like commitments to assets we've made. How can we either reuse them, or how do we just kind of stomach through them? Like the scope and budget of this game, you can tell it's a passion project that's Patreon funded, because a business would not make a project this way. It was very much a month to month, let's just kind of add stuff and have fun sort of thing, rather than like we have a budget and a set number of dollars we're gonna
that's really funny you mentioned that, because I was curious as to how the Patreon fed into the visual novel. Like it's been running for over 4 years, and obviously it's played a significant part into the development strategy. So I was curious, like did it end up posing any sort of challenges for you, like when it came to solicited input from patrons, be it through buying cameos or any sort of poll results or anything like that? Did that challenge the development in any way, or did it really truly feed in a kind of a very harmonious way?
I think that's a good Zoe question as our community person.
Well, I think our patrons have been very patient with us. Every time I kind of go back into the archives of like posts that we did or builds and stuff, I look at some of the old assets that we used to have in the game, and I think like, wow, people really did enjoy this game where we had just MS Paint backgrounds of everything, and sprites where it was like a normal sprite of them with an MS Paint triangle on top of them with the words "Maid Outfit" printed on top of them. So
It's amazing.
I should be very thankful to the patience of our patrons. Challenge-wise, though, I think there definitely was perhaps a self-imposed idea that, like, no, we really have to churn out content. Like, month to month, it needs to be, like, we can't take a month off and, have a light month of development. I think we kind of had a self-imposed idea that, okay, we have to have a whole new day in each route every month going forward.
Yeah, it was really motivational.
Yeah, I found that cadence really important personally as well. Like, I think that was part of what made the project succeed, was like giving ourselves this like time box of like within 1 month we will make 1 day's worth of content, which is, I don't know what that translates to in script, but it was approximately similar amount in script per day.
Right.
And then we were like, placeholder CG, placeholder CG, placeholder CG. Oh my god, we are racking up so much like asset debt. I sure hope, I don't know, someone specifically named Mira will just appear and take care of this later in the future.
Yeah, and I feel it was also kind of motivating to have, we had for a long time people vote on what route that we worked on next, or what art assets we did. So it both kind of let us know what sort of art assets people were most looking forward to, because I know that, like, some games or visual novels, they try and like have everything, all the content set before they release it, and we were like Gunzel said, like releasing lots of new story with lots of unfinished art, and so it was nice to know what patrons were most looking forward to in terms of art. That kind of helped us kind of cut a few actually art pieces that didn't end up in the game. And actually one thing that was, I think, very motivating was we had, like I said, all the different routes, and you could vote on which route was worked on for the next month. And I think when we had all the lineup, we're like, oh man, everyone's going to want, every single month Sylvia's going to win because she's like the hot Valley girl and people are going to want to see her every month. But then it turned out that like people were invested in all the different storylines, and all the different characters like would win at different times. People just really wanted to see all the different storylines and not just like focus on one all the time. So it was encouraging to see that there was interest in all the routes, not just like the ones that we might have thought the general public would be into.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Honestly, the fact that all of the different patrons were having different characters win each month, like you said, I think speaks to the depth of the writing for the characters. And I guess one thing that I imagine was probably not necessarily complicated by the Patreon, but like potentially fed into that as well, was how you went about actually coding the actual software, because that's something that has always been particularly fascinating to me. And I will be honest in that, despite my own background with coding stuff, I don't actually know what architecture the visual novel's built on. And so I was curious just to ask like how that came about, and like, was it coded from scratch or was there something that you built upon?
We'll leave Gunzel to that.
Yeah, okay. So my first couple of attempts at a narrative-driven game were in Unity. I think a combination of like Unity and Yarn. And that was more like here's a little isometric game where you walk around and talk to people. Or I think I did a prototype with Heartgear of a very early idea of a visual novel for her comic, The Collector. Oh wait, which is now a visual novel. Actually, it's funny because I was working on that in Unity with Heart, and then I'm like, man, this is a lot of work. And she's like, what if we just use RenP? And I'm like, yeah, we should probably just use RenP. Like, she was ready to drop a list of pros and cons. I'm like, nah, this is too much work. So RenP is like the de facto standard for making a visual novel. It is an engine that's dedicated to just making a visual novel, and it's super easy to use, or at least for like to get started with. So that's what most people use. So the Mice T is built with RenP with a whole bunch of custom character display code to make it work the way it does. When we were working on the game, there was a very early feature, I think, called like layered images that was not quite out yet. And I guess to give a bit of a background on the internals of the game, when you look at like at one of the very first scenes is like you have Margaret and she drinks tea and then like, oh, she now has mouse ears. Oh, she has a tail. Oh, she's got like facial features. And traditionally with a lot of these games, you'd like those would all be like distinct images. And what we do is we have like this paper doll system. So it's like we have this base that's like Margaret in her sweater with 0 arms and no face. And then we like overlay like here's her current eyes, here's like her ears, here's her tail and all that stuff. And we basically have this like Python class, this stuff where basically in Rempe I'd say like show Margaret TF level 4. We like use numbers for how TF'd they are, and then we had to like add species. So it's like, okay, she's species mouse, TF level 4. Maybe like she's hiding her tail, so keep the tail disappeared and stuff like that. But yeah, we basically have all this custom code that handles like layering all these images on top of each other and showing them as a distinct sprite. That was coded by my friend, or I guess a mutual VN author. I don't know. Someone I met through student transfer. What was it? Eliza. She, I think I was like talking to her about it, and she's like, and I was like describing what I wanted, and she's like, hold on. And then just like, here you go. I made a prototype of what you need. I'm like, sweet. And then I just took that and I ran with it.
That's amazing.
I think in the time since, hasn't that been added to Ren'Py as kind of a base feature?
Yes, there is a version of what we're doing that's like an official Ren'Py thing. So one thing we will end up needing to do in the future, or that I still need to do for future projects, is see how the different system works and how compatible it is with like our current custom code. Because yeah, there's the workflow is like Katie's like, here's a dump of all the sprites and stuff, and I'm like, sweet. And then I take that and then I like make a character display file, and I'm like, here's all the different eyes and mouths we care about, and like here's the order they need to display in. Now let me take all that and plug it into the character viewer so you can like actually play with the mouths and eyes and all that stuff like in a little sandbox environment. Okay, cool. Now I can use that to like show it in the game.
To give an idea of how many different elements that we have, Margaret just by herself, spoiler warning, just Margaret, not Peggy, not Maggie, not Margaret in her bride dress, or any of those variations. Just her, there are 419 different images that we can use to composite different sprites and expressions.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Something we didn't mention in terms of like planning issues is like when we started the game, we were like, I think Katie was like, ooh, we can draw different arm poses. I'm going to draw like 8 different arm poses for Margaret. Little did we know that we then would need to copy those or redraw those arms for each different outfit we had, or just have missing arms, and then had to deal with the logistical issue of like, okay, we have a new outfit. Which arms do we need? Okay, we can do these. Her thinking arms would work really well here. Okay, maybe draw those arms and stuff like that. And it's like, there's some fun combinational logistics issues.
The problem is that we're all like clothing fetishists, and so like we're always just like so excited to add a new outfit to everybody that we are trapped in the cycle of adding new cute outfits to people, and then realizing, oh crap, now we need to redraw all these arms and other assets.
That is a differentiator for us. Is that one thing that always bothers me about visual novels is characters with only like one outfit, and I want all the outfits. It's what I'm here for.
There are many outfits in the game. Can confirm from playing it, and I mean you can even track your progress on how many outfits you've unlocked, which I thought was very helpful because I was like, okay, there's like 10 for this one, and there's 7 for this one, and then there's also different versions of each character, and they have unique ones too, so you can track it, which is very good if you're a completionist.
Yeah, that's actually one of the final features that we're adding to the game right before its 1.0 release is we're adding a story chart, because that's what everybody keeps asking for us. It's like, I can't figure out how I can't get this like last CG or so. So we have a gigantic scrollable flow chart that's like, I don't know, like 420,000 pixels wide, just to show you how to get to every little piece of story in the game.
For the completionists out there.
And then on Steam, if you see every outfit, you will get the Sylvia's Apprentice achievement.
I love it. And I know Sylvia would too. And on that note, I guess I kind of wanted to shift over to the story itself. One of the things that really struck me the most about the story was how character-driven and deep the plot was outside of TF. Like, transformation is an instigator to drive the plot along, to be clear, and it plays a very important part on many levels. But as I was reading it, I just felt that at all times the story came first, and that was really refreshing. So I was curious to know, is that a takeaway that maybe I'm just inferring randomly, or was that kind of a deliberate decision on your parts to create the story for the game as overall?
So I would say that before turning it over to Gunzel and Zoe, because they are definitely the experts on story, I would say that we definitely value TF, but also the ramifications of TF, the social changes that are brought upon it, and having characters deal with that in a realistic but also like very like wholesome way.
There's a little bit of I guess DNA from my other project. I also work on student transfer that kind of leaked into Mice T when I was as a little bit of a background. I didn't mention I like also joined student transfer, worked on that for like 6 months, and then I was like, and for it's like you use a bunch of like stolen like they just like lift assets from like commercial Japanese VNs. I was like, what if I like started an original thing and paid people and we could make money? And that was like the other thing that like made Mice T exist. But I bring it up because like the way they like they also were very much like, okay, story first, and then like the TF mechanics are like the instigators that drive the story and like the motivators for the story. Like and that's one of the things that differentiates it from like, this is a fetish VN where a TF jerk appears and then they like bully the main character and then it's over, sort of thing, right? Like the plot isn't the TF, it's the things around it. Like they're very hard about that sort of thing. But the other thing about that game that leaked into Mice T is they have this like they call it the skeleton, but it's like the way it works is like the main character finds like a body swap device in that game, and like it's like they're going through their school day and he's like, oh, here's my friend so and so, should I show them the body swap device? And if it's like yes, it's like, okay, well that's their route, and like that is written by a completely different person, and it's like, okay, well no, oh well, here's my other friend so and so, should I show them the device? And then if you do that, then that's like another completely different path by another writer. So they were basically like trying to figure out how to crowdsource it and like segment these like completely different storylines into like the same game. And I mentioned that because like Mice T kind of like took on a bit of that flavor where it's like Margaret, like it's like it's kind of like who she confides in, or like who finds out about the T first. It's like this is now a completely like Margaret might as well be on the goddamn moon, like in one route versus another sort of thing, where it's like, okay, well in one she's like doing like heists, and then in another she's like running a bookstore, like a small business, and in another one she's in Vegas,
or 3 inches tall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and another one she's just 3 inches tall and figuring out how to be 3 inches tall. But like I would say like that was a decent combination of like kind of the initial like how are we structuring this game sorts of things, and yeah, just combined with like, because again my whole motivation here was like, how do I make a game that contains kink content but like I don't feel like a gross weirdo for like consuming it. It's like and I think a lot of that was like, okay, well you can include the kink content, but you like have this like story surrounding it that like gives it context and gives it meaning, and there's more to it.
there were a lot of scenes, very specific scenes and just general themes that we really wanted to hit on that are, our thing. I think like each path almost is like devoted to like a particular development member's kind of main kink interest. So we were very interested in getting to these like, various scenes and scenarios, but then we just like our characters too darn much that we don't just want to shove them in there. We want to, we want a natural way for them to get there, and we want like there to be realistic ramifications for that afterwards. So because of this kind of like care we have for our characters, we want to make sure that these like, sexy scenarios they're put in make sense and have, a broader and more meaningful context around them.
Funnily enough, our bad ends, the places where you would traditionally be mean to your characters and have fetish stuff happen, don't have fetish stuff happening.
People are just bummed.
They're just sad.
Yeah, you're just bummed out and the game's over. Because, like, if it's like, oh, I'm reading a mean-spirited force femme story, like, oh, yeah, I can't wait to watch this guy be forced to dress like a sexy lady, haha, bad end sort of thing. And here we're like, no, I don't know, Margaret had a falling out with her friends and it feels bad. The closest we had to that was when you, like, if Margaret doesn't make up with Sylvia at a certain point, she's, like, basically stuck with Peggy but doesn't know that Peggy's there. And I'm, like, kind of, like, seeding in, like, ooh, she's still floating around there. Ooh, she might come out and essentially possess you and make you do a bunch of sexy things. And that was like the very closest we got to like, ooh, like fetish content in a bad end. But even then, it's like we don't show it. We just like tease it. Like it's not because it's not
internally. Internally, we even refer to them as bummer ends instead of bad ends.
Yeah, building off of the emotion of the story and everything. Like my favorite parts to draw weren't I think I only got to do that's not true. I did a couple of full transformation CGs in the game, but my favorite ones to draw were really just these characters and their emotions, like Margaret banging on the door or Gavin and Margaret flying. Those were like I loved these characters so much, and I wanted to express that with their emotions, these strong emotions in these moments. And I'm so glad that this game actually treats them like people that have thoughts and feelings and dreams and goals and everything, instead of just fetish bait, I guess.
That was the first CG that you drew for us, was that Gavin one?
It was. It's probably my favorite, both because it was my first, but also because that was one of the ones that I saw and said, I want to draw this. I almost drew it for free. I was like, if I have a free weekend, I want to draw one of these CGs and just send it to them and being like, please use this.
As background, we really try to pay our artists a fair rate. So if she had done that, we would have forced her to take payment for
No,
it.
that's good. I appreciate that.
We don't bully our characters much, but we do bully our artists to take more money.
I tried to do it, and you told me, you were like, no, we're going to pay you.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I think one of the things I was going to actually mention, and building on that, was just the fact that Meisty has these very strong, defined characters, and you really do connect with them, and they feel like they have their own motivations. And so I guess I was curious, how did you balance character motivations against the broader themes you wanted to speak to through the plot? Because I imagine there may have been some times where their motivations may have, in some ways, come into conflict with the story itself.
I think the reason that comes across most is because I think that is my kind of main strength as a writer is character interactions and character voice. I think that's kind of what I kind of lean into to kind of show off my skills is like, character dialogues and consistent voices and distinct voices for the characters. Here's a tip for writers who are trying to make their characters sound different. Start off with someone you hear a lot of and just try and base it off that. I listen to too many goddamn podcasts, and so sometimes what I'll do is I'll take a person I've heard this person talk for hundreds of hours. I'm going to start off with them as a jumping off point and then kind of find something unique from there. And so starting from that is trying to create these really kind of defined characters. It kind of becomes easy to kind of see where they go based on those interactions and, how they come across as a character. When you have a character like Sylvia who, thinks that she's kind and wants to be kind, but is kind of blind to the kind of context around her and the ways that her kind of experience and, background that kind of shields her from other people's troubles. Once you kind of have that in place and you see how, once the story gets to the part where her actions kind of start to negatively affect people, it's easy to kind of go from there with that nugget and feel out how she would act and how the story would progress from there based on that kind of very concrete initial character kind of idea.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. And honestly, I think when it comes to Sylvia in particular, that very much shines through. I thought there was some very interesting interactions between her and Margaret that speak to her kind of coming to those realizations about her background and how that plays into how she views the world, particularly given how she treats Margaret at points. So I appreciate that too.
I feel like, I'm trying to figure out if it's more than the Julie route, but I do think in general a lot of the routes were kind of initially spawned from what would this character do if this tea was forced in their hands and they got to play with it. And in that way, I would say that the motivations really drive the story. Or it's how's it go? It's what they want versus what they need sort of thing. For Julie route was very much I think that was me being if you're an anarchist lesbian and you got the tea, I was talking to my wife and I'm and you got tea that turned into an animal person, what would you do? She's free disguise, go rob some people. And I'm got it. That's what this route is now. And then it was funny because it's okay, well, that's the premise, but what is the emotional through line? And that took a little more teasing to kind of get out of okay, they're doing this series of heists, but also there's this background of Margaret wanting to try and get a real relationship out of, or get what she wants out of this relationship, while Julie wants other things, and kind of the tension there, while they're also performing a bunch of cool heists. And there's a bunch of also weird that's also an interesting route because it's basically just Margaret and Julie, and then Gavin doesn't show up until the very end, and then also I guess Sylvia and this weird character named Portia are having fun in the background and have no idea what's happening.
Well, Gavin gets to give the sage friend advice at least.
Oh yeah,
during
he does.
that route. So we throw him a bone there, but
yeah. And then it's the turning small route was was just Margaret's 3 inches tall, go, sort of thing.
Yeah, that was the one route that was kind of least aligned with one of the dev members' interest or kinks. But then we thought wait a second, she's a mouse. She should turn small, right? We can't let this whole project go without the mouse lady turning small. I guess we'll just do a size route. And then I hear people say oh man, now I'm into size play because of that route. And I'm okay, good, because I wasn't into size play at the start of the route either. So I'm glad it worked out for both of us.
Yeah, I was going to bring up exactly what Zoe said, is that just if most of the routes have elements or are completely based off of things that we're really into, that one was just okay, we kind of have to do it. But then near the end, we were just we were so excited we did this because we got to see so many, even just outside of the sexy stuff, I absolutely loved drawing a tiny little Margaret poking out of Gavin's vest,
Yes.
pointing at stuff in the shot.
That sprite is adorable.
Standing on a pedestal at the wedding, standing in Julie's hands as they kiss. It was so much fun.
So then I'm curious, you've talked a lot already about how you kind of developed some of the plot of the story, but I guess my question was, were there any routes that you felt were really difficult to write? It sounds like maybe this one at the beginning was, but were there any other complications when you were writing specific routes?
For the Sylvia route, that's the one that deals with hypnotism, and that wasn't a thing that I was kind of had much experience with at the time. And the way that we kind of ended up with the Sylvia route, the way that we ended up with the Sylvia route was a little bit different from kind of like the things that got some of us into Hypno in the first place. Some of that just had to do with like the fact that I was talking before, like, we like these characters so much, we want like the best things for them, and we thought like, okay, how do we like make this like hypnotism path, which is like, very often there's kind of like weird, like, dark kind of connotations with that kink. And we thought like, okay, what's like the most like positive kind of like, way that we can present this, and that kind of like led us off into a different path and kind of like maybe what we initially led to do. And part of that's like, okay, like we did like the kind of like atypical Hypno road. Now let's do a little side route where we can just have like a lot of like fun like stage Hypno shenanigans where we make people think there's something they're not, and we'll throw that kind of bone to the kind of the Hypno people. If they don't want like like the self-improvement through Hypno route, we have the one where like we make a lady think she's a dog and bark around and stuff.
Yeah, that one was interesting because we had no idea. Like, I think that was very much a like, we are building this plane while it's in flight type of things. And it's like, and it was a thing where it wasn't like, okay, well, we have this sequence where through this hypnosis, Margaret gets this alternate personality, and then like, I guess we reconcile that, and now there's kind of this pluralism. I would say like, I guess like possession, like Margaret's allowing someone to possess her while she is conscious situation going on. And now we have set 4 more days of content. What do we do? Sort of thing. So like, I think there's definitely like there was not a lot of the amount of outlining and the amount of planning kind of like varied. And I think that like that built that like kind of went to the strengths, and that allowed us to be kind of like fluid and like have a lot of fun ideas in some routes. And in other ones, it's like, yeah, we're like, well, we veered off in this other direction that we didn't intend on going in. Whoops.
And yeah, I think we ended up finding like a lot of good, story and character and sexy scenes via some of those places that we veered off that we didn't intend to. But they definitely were kind of different from what we set out to do in the first place.
Yeah. Sylvia route was like, Sylvia needs to hypnotize Margaret to be a hot, sexy Garu, and also Sylvia has 2 penises. That was like number 1 and 2.
Well, I appreciate that dedication to detail, so thank you for that. I guess that I'm also curious in terms of, obviously one of the hallmarks of a visual novel is the ability to make these decisions that send you down particular paths. I know you talked a little bit about how the kind of beginning was built off of the other project that you had done, Gunzil, but I'm curious how you designed overall the decision trees for the various permutations of the story, because they do obviously feel very deliberate. Like you've already mentioned, there are some bummer endings and such, but what was the design process behind the crafting of the story in with this kind of decision-making process that you see in video games?
Well, I think Gunzel mentioned a little bit before, but certain visual novels have the sort of thing where like you have a main kind of trunk story and you have little branches that kind of remerge with it. Mice T is very much kind of like, which of these 4 short stories do you want to read that aligns with either your kink or the characters you want to see? So they're very distinct. They don't kind of merge back onto each other. And one of the things that I think some players have given us feedback that maybe that's not what they prefer, but every single time you make a decision in the game, it results in new story content. There's not like little diversions where like, you choose a different dialogue option to have a little bit of like, dialogue flavor. Every time you make a decision in the game, you see different things based on it. And so there aren't quite as many choices as in some visual novel, but they do result in very distinct, very different content depending on where you go down. And we think that kind of makes it a little bit easier for players to kind of track their progress and, not have to select these 14 very specific options in order to get the very super secret ending. Which we feel is a little bit kind of becomes tedious after a while.
Yeah. The major visual novel choice design pet peeves I have that I wanted to avoid at all costs are the series of flavor choices that accrue arbitrary points that then maybe get you an ending that you want, which I think was Snow Days was one I played like that, where it was like you have no feedback on what these dialogue options do, but if you pick, or it's like kind of vague feedback, but if you pick the wrong ones, then like, yeah, you got the bad ending, but not the sexy one. But if you want the sexy bad ending, you need to do these things.
Yeah, it's the thing where, like, if you have pancakes on day 2, that results in, something wild on the last
Yeah, stuff
day.
that, like, there's zero foreshadowing. Like, all of the choices in Mice Tea have very explicit and clear and obvious consequences, where it's like, and are beefy enough to make you feel like, okay, that was a distinct thing, where it's like, the biggest one that is the least of a plot branching thing is the cat scratch choice, where Margaret gets scratched by a newly TG'd Felicia. There's enough TG juice for Margaret to have a penis. And then that like changes like a later or gives you a choice in a later scene.
And I think through the development, I think we tried to make the kind of outcomes of those choices even more explicit. I remember whether you start the Julie day or the Julie path or the Felicia path was whether you like turn left or right, basically. And we came to the decision like, oh wait, that's not like really giving people much of an idea of like what they can expect from doing these decisions. So like we made it more specific, like, okay, no, go home or follow Felix. And hopefully we have things like content warnings that can tell you what to expect from each route, but hopefully just intuitively players can kind of like expect certain content based on what's in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that content warnings in particular were very helpful as I was navigating it. The funny thing, actually, I will just say is I couldn't figure out how to get to Gavin's route when I first played, and then I had to like go back and like be like, oh, it was the size play route. But otherwise, everything was like very clear to me.
Here's some TFT. The first choice is whether you want to overdose on it. Have fun.
God, that's one of the funniest lines in the game.
Oh, just the choice whether or not to take it.
Just the yes, 8 tea bags, put 8.
Yeah, that is enough.
Yeah,
that is some Gunzel writing that survived.
And yeah, the other one is like berating yourself for being a drunk idiot and getting the calculation wrong.
Yeah, no, you drunk idiot. God, I love that. It's so good.
I'd love to touch a little more actually on the character diversity within the story. As I kind of alluded to earlier, I think one of the massive strengths in my mind is the diversity of the cast, and it meaningfully affects the story. So when it came to the process of developing the characters themselves, I know, Zoe, you touched a little bit on like tips for building a basis for characters, but how did you as a group come to developing the characters themselves, and how did you then balance that against ensuring that there was a diverse cast?
I'll take a little bit of this. One of the things, so at the beginning of development, everyone was white, and we sort of like thought, okay, well,
Margaret was like it was kind of vague with Margaret.
It was vague with Margaret, but yeah, she was definitely more tan than the others, and I think at the time was she Brazilian at that point?
No, she was
okay.
vaguely off-white. It wasn't until like 2019. It wasn't until we like showed it at like that 2019 convention where some people were like, all these characters are white. And we're like,
yes.
Shit.
That's exactly what I wanted to bring up. Is we actually, I was actually with the Changeling Tale folks at Anthro New England in 2019, and they were gracious enough to allow us to put a Mice T demo on the same machine that they were playing their Changeling Tale demos on. And we had a gentleman sit down and play it, and he's like, this is really good. I like where it's going. Do you guys have any plans for any like diversity in the cast? And that's where we was just like, oh man, we should really like look into that a bit more. And I think that at that point it was just like, okay, well, we kind of have Narrowpan on staff. Let's ask him about like, what if we made Margaret Brazilian? What sort of things would her background and heritage look like, and how can we incorporate that? And I think Zoe did a wonderful job with that.
Yeah. At first, like we thought, like, oh, this will be great. We have this person on the development team who can help us with that stuff. And then, as we mentioned, he unfortunately had to bow out of the team. And then what we had is we already had some fans who were Brazilian or Brazilian American, and we could go to them. One specifically is mentioned in the credits and gets a shout out for giving us those insights. And I think it was important to ask first, or make your kind of first kind of impulse to ask about something. I remember early on we had a line at the bar. It occurs earlier in the story where Margaret's talking about how her relatives are getting on her for not being married yet. And I think the original line was my parents are on my case about getting married. And then I realized like, oh, wait a second. I'm kind of making an assumption that is a kind of relevant touchstone for Brazilian people. Like, I should actually ask, like, is that something that people would that would ring true? And so I asked this person. They said, "Oh no, the stereotype, in Brazil is that your aunts are the ones who are going to get on your case for being unmarried." And so I was like, "Okay, that is actually going to be a relevant thing. I will add that detail. Thank you." And there's just like other parts of the game where it's you have to stop and like avoid making the assumption, avoid making that you assume that these things are universal. Like, no, I'm actually going to take the effort to ask and see if I can get a more true to life detail here.
Yeah, I will say that stood out to me. Like, obviously, as I alluded to at the top, like Margaret particularly resonated with me as someone who has Brazilian heritage and only has kind of okay Portuguese. And, that moment that you mentioned stood out to me. I was like, okay, someone definitely knew what they were doing when they wrote this, because that is a stereotype. And the Portuguese that's within the visual novel is all correct grammatically and works very well, and that made me happy to see as well. So I guess, I was going to ask as to how you kind of brought that sort of authenticity to each character's background and worldview, and it sounds like you were able to get direct feedback from people who had those backgrounds, which I think is really fantastic.
Yeah, if your first impulse is to ask, that goes a long way. We got some impulse from some Chinese speakers with the label on the tea as Julie as a Chinese speaker, like how would she read this Japanese text, and what would she be able to pick out from her own knowledge, and what she would have to sit down and translate. I remember one of the funniest things that came from kind of asking some of our fans who have that kind of like firsthand cultural knowledge is I got exposed to just a lot of like Brazilian memes that they would use to share with me. And like, okay, like, oh, we need to like, add some like details to Margaret's apartment. I got you. Here is the Brazilian apartment starter pack meme. And it's like, like the dark brown glass plates and the filtro de barro, water filter that everybody has. I'm like, okay, those are going in the background. Perfect. This is what we need.
One of the more interesting, or not more interesting, but they're all interesting. One of the quirkier little things, Zoe, I want you to talk about is how you came up with the pun for one of the final sequences in the Felicia path.
Oh yes, I've been a little bit worried this podcast that we're going in a little bit too much spoiler territory, and this is kind of a late game thing, but I think it's relevant. There's you learn in all the different routes that what you turn into when you drink the tea is altered based on any additives that you add, and so if you add lion's mane, you turn into a lion. Pretty simple. And I came up with this idea of like, okay, how they're going to test the limits of this power that the tea has. And one of the characters notices like, wait a second, why would you turn into a lion if you put lion's mane in it? There's nothing like inherently lion-like about this plant. It's only because you speak English that you make the connection, right? And so there's a scene where they're testing the limits of this, and they put bay leaf into the tea, and Margaret turns into a parrot because Loro is bayleaf in Portuguese and is also a kind of nickname for parrots. And it doesn't affect other characters the same way. And so I said, like, okay, I'm going to do the scene, and I need to have the equivalent of like lion's mane or zebra grass, but in Portuguese. So I ended up going into the Reddit and asking people, like, okay, Brazilian speakers of Reddit, what is a plant animal pun that I can put into this game? And I got a lot of good suggestions, and the parrot one made the most sense. And Mira brought that to life, and I think it's one of the kind of like the more kind of dramatic, visually impressive TFs in the game.
Oh yeah, the progression on that one is really cool. Yeah, like it was great to see, and when you said bayleaf, I immediately knew what it was going to be, and that made me very happy.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah, I was like, yes, someone knows what they're doing. Yeah, it was just the Brazilian connection got me. I don't know what to tell you, but it did.
I have been very surprised about how much that has resonated with people. I think I got a little bit of inkling when we first kind of decided that Margaret was going to be Brazilian when we had Nero on the team, is that like, oh, like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, we'll have her be Brazilian. And then like I look into it like, wait a second, there are very, very few just kind of Brazilian characters in American popular culture. Like, it's a real big dearth. Like 2 characters in Street Fighter are not much else, honestly. And so it's been very fun to see the enthusiasm that Margaret elicits in a lot of people. Like in some of the commissions that we've done, they see her speaking Portuguese and specifically Brazilian Portuguese, and people just get very excited about that.
Yeah, I will say that as the meme goes, Brazilians are quite vocal online, and so we have to punch a little bit above our weight in terms of representation sometimes, and we make up for that by being loud on the internet. So
we see a lot of Brazil mentioned memes.
Yes.
Since Margaret is Brazilian and shows up in commissions and art and stuff.
Yeah, I will say there's a meme that I sent one of my friends as I started playing the game. It's is that a motherfucking Brazil reference? And I just like sent it almost immediately. I was like, oh my god, and like that was my reaction. My friend was like, I see what is happening already in the game. Good luck and have fun. So I got very excited. But
yeah, we have yet to like make a meme that stars Margaret in one of those. So
I hope someday you do, because it will be a banger in my opinion. And yeah, I guess like, building off of that, like one of the things that I felt, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, was that, each of the characters in the story has very clear goals and motivations, and they often feel like they're very built off of their backstories quite effectively. So you talked a little bit, I think, about Margaret's backstory, and we've talked a little bit, I think, in part about Julie's. Were there any specific things that you'd like to note for Sylvia and Gavin and Felicia?
Well, I think one of the funny things it had to do with Gavin's kind of background and characterization is like, okay, we have one straight guy. We need to make him the best straight guy possible. Like there's only one in the game. We need to like imbue all the good qualities we can possibly give him into this one guy, since he's such a sweet and nice boy. Let's see. I think for Sylvia, I mentioned a little bit kind of how her background can kind of led her to be kind of like less kind and less of a good friend than she wanted to be. And I think her kind of background is kind of a rich and privileged person who has to confront that in the story and has to kind of see how that's not a universal experience. Let us kind of play around with like the kind of like rich girl stereotypes in fun ways that allowed that to serve as like, just a fun character archetype to start out with, but one that like, was fun to have her grow, not necessarily out of, but like grow from. And
we also gave her like we have an internal idea of what her like, I guess like transition looked like, that we just chose not to include in game in any way. Just say like, this is her sort of thing.
Anyone else, I guess, when we were kind of like in the initial planning stages of the different characters?
Sorry, I just I wasn't part of the planning, but I wanted to talk about the impact of I don't know if I should say Mice T spoilers, but fucking Mice T spoilers. We got two trans girls in the game.
I've spoiled the game so much already.
Yeah, I mean, and it was so one of the Felicia's route is the full, you get to see Felicia's transition and coming to grips with being trans and the euphoria and everything, and that's absolutely wonderful. But it was also a breath of fresh air to have Sylvia just come out also in one of the funniest fucking jokes in the game.
Oh my god, yes.
Just come out and just be like, Margaret, I'm transgender. And just, I remember where I was when I was reading it. I was on vacation and I was just sitting on the couch and I just literally went like, yes! I was so deliriously happy to have that kind of trans representation in the game. And then to get it twice with Felicia was, like, there are so many moments in the game for trans women like me that are so just affirming in, like Felicia getting her ID and everything, and just, God, it's, I don't know. I thought it was very important to mention the importance of that and kind of the effect it had on me personally, which is why I probably fucking put so much effort into CGs that had the both of them in them.
Yeah, I think when you have like a transformation game and you have trans characters, your first initial thought is like, oh, well, of course, that's going to be the story, right? And we do include that in the game. But we thought it would be a fun change of pace and refreshing in a way if there's a TF game, but this character has already had their transition years ago. Like, that's not the story. Like, that's part of their background, but that is like not relevant at all to the kind of ongoing story. It's just like a fact about them. It's, it's just a part of who they are. It's not the kind of main focus of this transformation story.
Yeah. No, I thought that was very refreshing too, and I really appreciated that there was that level of representation in the game, and also that it felt very organically built in. I
will also say that, much like Gavin, I am the sole straight guy in this group. And I feel very privileged to be working with such a diverse group of people who can even just open my eyes to that sort of content and sort of help me understand from a way that I would never thought I would the things that, trans, non-binary, people go through.
I think my favorite piece of community feedback. I realize that we talk about Mice T spoilers a bit, but we also haven't necessarily given a plot synopsis of the game. So most people will probably have played the game if they're this far in. Anyway, one of my favorite pieces of fan feedback I've heard was like when someone would play through the Felicia route and then they'd like start another route and they're like, oh, Felix, I haven't heard that name in years. Oh, gee, I sure hope everything works out for this person, this timeline. And it's like, who do you think you're dealing with? It's like at the very beginning, I'm like, I'm going to think of a fun or funny way to have this character transition in every path. And that's like one of those little joys I had in like outlining these different paths. It's like how are we gonna have this person kind of like come to grips with their identity?
Yeah.
In this timeline.
Oh man, yeah, no, that was honestly fantastic to see in each of the paths. And then I guess that makes me think then what the process was behind developing the transformations that applied to each character, because of the idea, of course, was that the animal that someone transformed into was based kind of on the person's character, and so I was curious as to like. Obviously, you talked about Margaret and the initial concept and how that related to mice, but I was curious as to how you settled on the creatures for the other characters.
Well, that's the main joke of Mice T. If nothing else, like the thing that's funny about Mice T is that Margaret turns into a mouse. All of her paramours turn into predators of mouse, and she still doms the shit out of them anyway.
It's true.
most of the time she doms. Sometimes not, but we always like let her get the upper hand sometimes in the relationship. So yeah, the predator prey thing was a big thing, and I think the only route in which that isn't the most clear is the Julie route, and that's because that's the route where you are the little bandit who runs around righting wrongs by stealing stuff. So the raccoon was perfect for that. Yeah, it really was just that kind of like predator prey dynamic that we wanted to play around with and invert most of the time. But
yeah, it started with the cat and mouse, and then I'm like, oh wait, we should have other love interests. How do we extrapolate on cat and mouse?
Yeah. For Sylvia, it was definitely a case of like, oh man, we really like hot, like Yaru office-ish like ladies, but we also really like Gunzel's really into hypnosis, and I was like, well, what if we make her a snake? And I like snake ladies. Let's do that. And it sort of
Exactly.
and that too, and it just fit the narrative so well to just like, okay, she's a snake now, perfect. And Gavin, I think Gavin was the one we had the hardest time with, because none of us on the staff, or okay, out of all the like hardcore furries on the staff, I would say I am not particularly into birds, and I have not really drawn a lot of birds. But at the same time, it was sort of like that necessary, like, if we're gonna have predators of mice, I feel like we've got to have a bird, right? And so that sort of just ended up being Gavin's TF, and we just like wanted to make, like, even though like it wasn't something we were particularly like into before, we wanted to make his TF as interesting as possible. And that is also sort of where I think the idea that Gavin, spoilers again, is actually just a TF fetishist himself also came into play, where he's just like, oh, cool, I'm a hawk. That's this is my fetish, that kind of thing.
I gotta say that reveal actually had me like howling, because it was the last path I played, and I was like, we went through the whole thing, and this was just sitting right here, and I didn't realize it was here. It was very funny.
If you go back and play a few different routes when he's first introduced to the T and what happens from it, you might notice some particular reactions he has to that information.
Yes.
Quote, oh my god, a cat girl.
Yeah.
Also, Gavin is like the most on the nose of all the name puns that we have for our characters and what they turn into. His name literally means like Falcon of the Falcon.
That's true, actually. I hadn't thought about that, but that's a good point.
Yeah.
A lot of members of our community for a long time were very, very insistent that they had either figured out Gavin's TF, or they're like, I know what it's gonna be, or it's probably gonna be this, right? And they were just like, what's the word? Postulate? Yeah, theory craft, like, what is Gavin's TF? Mm-hmm. And at the moment that we sort of dropped the update that revealed it, Zoe, like the mastermind she is, put together like this conspiracy theory chart of all the different ways that Gavin, and all like his name and all of the things that he says, like, points to the fact that he would turn into a hawk, or at least a bird.
That's amazing. I love that you had a chart ready.
Yeah, I drew with my left like non-dominant hand the meme of like the snowman from that horror movie, and wrote, "We gave you all the clues," and it's Margaret with her like mice ears and tails and stuff.
Margaret de Campos, which is like Margaret of the Fields, or
Rato de Campo is like a type of mouse in Portuguese.
I was rereading part of the beginning this morning, and I noticed, Zoe, that you put in, like, the book that she's reading, the part that she's talking to Gavin about is literally the character getting turned into a bird, and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
And then in the very next scene, like, the football helmet is just Gavin. The sports mascot on the football helmet is just Gavin.
Oh my gosh. Well, speaking on that as well, obviously each character's story also features particular sexual themes that are tied to their wants and desires. I think you've kind of answered how you settled on some of the specific kinks, given you were like, let's put in our kinks. But were there any that like you had to leave out but really wished you could have included?
1, 2, 3. Bunny outfits.
Pregnancy.
We sort of saw that question coming, and we were just like, okay, we got to answer all at once. No, let's go alphabetically again.
The fun thing is that the game we conspire to make after this one is to fill those gaps. The biggest thing that I was not able to get out of this game was any kind of basically like cross-dressing and gender bender that doesn't necessarily have a explicit like trans through line. And there's a little bit of it with Gavin, but there's like this is like he's not the POV character, and it's like just a little taste. But the biggest thing is like I want to see guys in cute dresses. I want to see guys in cute dresses, and I want to see them get railed.
Honestly, I love this. This sounds great. Sorry, continue.
So my biggest thing is just I am a very like I wear my likes on my sleeve, I guess you could say. I'm just really into bunny girls. I like bunny girls and bunny suits, and while we did draw one outfit that Margaret wears for like a hot minute it's more than a hot minute, I guess, in one of the endings, I didn't get to draw any bunny suits in this game. And I'm like, that is one of my biggest things. I got to draw a couple office ladies. That's my other big thing. But I love me some bunny suits and bunny girls and leotards and stockings and high heels. And
to briefly interject, very early on, someone asked, "What? You're not putting bunny suits in this visual novel you're brainstorming?" And I remember Katie, you said something like, "Well, I want to like work up my skill for the next one, and then I'm going to do it really good." So we're on track.
Mira?
I'm a huge fan of gender transformation and then leading to pregnancy and all of the highs and lows that comes with that and all the difficulties and everything. Basically, one of the things I love that the game does well for other transformations is exploring the implications of the transformation. Like, not just like, oh, they transformed and then they're done. It's like, no, you gotta live in it. Like, you gotta live with this. And I love that for pregnancy TGs. But unfortunately, I was too late. Oh no, which is probably for the best, because I think I would probably be too self-indulgent.
We actually were kind of brainstorming for future projects and if we would include that. And it was funny because we were having that conversation on our Discord and kind of brainstorming about what it could be. And we had to, me and Mira had to like handhold Gunzel as like what the kink entailed. Because like we're like, oh, we should add pregnancy in this game, and Guns went, oh yeah, there'll be a jump forward, and then it's dropping your kids off at like daycare, and we're like, no, it's not being a parent fetish. It is specifically being pregnant. It's like trying to get the cat to like look at the camera by holding like the jingle bell behind it.
You don't understand. We want a slow burn.
Yeah.
Yeah, the part where the impregnation happens. No, the part where they are pregnant and have a big belly.
Yeah. We want swollen heels and maternity dresses, all right?
One of the other things that happened during development, there is a particular transformation in the Julie path that I am very grateful to Gunzel and Zoe for letting me include, because it is a very indulgent TF for me. It's probably there's a question later on like what's one of the favorite things that you drew for the project. I was very happy to be able to draw that TF and that particular fetish, because that's just like outside of my like more like superficial ones, that is one of the ones that I'm really into.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you like what our we used to have a feedback form that like you would on our itch.io page that would let you like give feedback on what is like still more like an active development, not like in wrapping up development.
Right.
And we would say like, oh, what fetishes would you like to see us explore? And there were well, for one, there were ones that we really liked. Was like, oh, please add this into the game, and they're like, haha, that is in the game. Aren't you in for a nice surprise once you play the full thing? And then the other two that we got all the time were pregnancy, which we've already talked about, and vor. Everyone is very surprised that we didn't add vor to the game with like the tiny mouse lady who was hit on by all these predators. I remember early on, yeah, we were we had a different kind of team member who's no longer on the team. Who would always bully us about not adding vor to the game, to the extent that we had an official development team meme that was. Have you ever seen that meme where it's like the princess being protected by the knight?
Yes, yes.
From all the peasants throwing tomatoes at her.
Yeah.
Our version of that was Brittany and Gunzel bullying KD to add vor to Mice T, and that was me with a shield protecting KD from their slings and arrows.
I drew bunny ears on the princess and everything, and made her hair blue, and it was a good time.
I guess then last question, and this is my self-indulgent question. I'm personally very big on content, which of course isn't a focus of this work. I mean, given the main character is a woman and such. So are there any plans for a Brazzle spin-off, or in the next game, or no?
I definitely want Well, I'm trying to think how to put it. There's definitely gonna be gay sex, is what I want to have.
Okay,
male
amazing.
on male sex.
Amazing.
That's what content I want in the next game. The big thing I wanted with the next game was as someone who over the course of the development of Mice T kind of came to terms with my own gender and eventually settled on non-binary, not really feeling any representation surrounding being non-binary and basically anywhere. It's okay, you're trans, so you're gonna do estrogen and take procedures to be a woman. I'm no, I just like to wear dresses and makeup and look cute, and I totally still love my body. And it's one of those things where it's okay, well, how can I encompass that in a game? So it's a major part of the next game is having a character who is able to TG for fun sexy times, but still be okay with a male or female body, and still be able to date characters where that character can accept them no matter what body they have. So it's a thing we are brainstorming there would be okay, well, the main character's dating a dude, and then sometimes they're having fun girl mode dates, and sometimes they're having fun boy mode dates, and it kind of just depends on how they're feeling and stuff like that. Those are the kind of notes I am hoping to hit.
Well, I look forward to that. That sounds like a great time. I guess I'd like to touch on the last topic that I had, and that was around actually doing the drawings for the visual novel, and talk a little bit about the art development process and how that came to be. So I guess to start, and you have talked about this to some degree, but how did you go about creating each character visually? Did you already have a strong visual mental image, or was there an extensive concepting stage?
There was a lot of concepting for Margaret. We actually have quite a few versions of Margaret. Actually, I think Heartgear also helped give us 3 bookish looking girls to go off of, and then I just sort of started building off of that with oh, here's a woman that is in a skirt and a completely different outfit than Margaret has. Then here's one in a sweater, and it's okay, well, they're gonna wear an oversized sweater and comfy pants because she's not very confident with her body.
Yeah, I'm actually going through, and we're adding a kind of bonus gallery to the game that has concept art and stuff. And yeah, I think the earliest thing is a Heartgear concept that's a little lineup, and oh yeah, that left one on the left, that's definitely Margaret.
Yep. And then for the other characters, Sylvie was very much we are into office ladies and Gyaru, and what can we how can we just make a very smart and sexy dressed girl in our game. And so I just threw together stuff. As I said before, Narrowpan was also very influential in the style that we took the game.
Right.
I would say that the Mice T art style and my own art style actually as a conduit of that has become a bit more a bit less strictly anime, and a bit more I don't know, cartoony anime. And like especially in the way that like Margaret's hair is rendered, or how the cats are rendered, for example, like Felicia's cats. And like that was very much as a result of Narrowpan helping us to develop some of the CG scenes, and just like him doodling the characters on his own time, or making little silly doodles of them.
That's where the pickle shirts came from.
Yes, we never touched on that. Narrowpan has this character that's just like the princess of all pickles named Piccolini, and he didn't want to, but he jokingly added like in a character lineup like Piccolini's secret fifth character, and we're just like, well, we want to, Nero's not going to be part of the project for much longer anymore, but we want to sort of keep like the spirit of Nero in this project. So that's when Julie started suddenly wearing a bunch of novelty pickle t-shirts with a bunch of pickle puns on them.
They're all great, for the record. They're all great puns.
She's a lesbian that wears short shorts and t-shirts, and we really got the mileage out of that.
We wanted like one for like pretty much like one new for every time she shows up in the game, but then we just ran out of puns. We have one more good name for or one more good pickle pun, but we couldn't include it because it had like a copyrighted term in it, and like, crap, we can't put that in.
She was the easiest person to make outfits for because we just recolored her shirt and then we put a different graphic on it.
Yep.
As opposed to everyone else, which was a lot, especially Sylvia. Sylvia was like, all right, just do a whole new thing.
Sylvia's got not only different outfits, but different hairstyles. And depending on like how she's presenting herself, like she's got a completely different pose that we need to draw those outfits around. Sometimes those outfits are on both pose, so we have to draw them twice and that sort of thing.
We make her not tan for a gag, and then we have to live with it.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Well, obviously, as you've also mentioned with the discussion about the arms earlier, I mean, creating art for a visual novel requires a massive amount of variation for the characters, and it's thus very intensive. So I guess for Mira and KD, like, how did you find the process overall in terms of having to draw 50 million sets of arms and things like that?
Honestly, that was probably like, if there's, I don't want anyone to have the impression that any part of Mice T was terrible or like that I hated it.
Yeah.
Like, this game has literally changed my life. But I will say that the lowest point that I was at was just literally realizing that I had to draw like 60 different arms for Margaret and just banging those out one after the other, and everyone on stream making jokes about how I'm turning her arms on and off, and it's like, oh, she's unarmed. All that silliness, and just like at the same time maybe not having the best experience with my professional life, and it's just like, this is really grating. I hope I get through this soon. But it definitely ended in sort of like, okay, here's just a trickle of new stuff. And Zoe was also very helpful near the back half of the project, where she'd be like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write the scene, determine what outfits they're going to be in, and then I'm going to specifically tell you what arm poses you need to draw in this outfit, so that you don't have to draw every single one and then have to do all that extra work.
And then I had to write a bunch of logic in the character viewer to like basically check whether that arm file exists or not, and then if it doesn't, like basically like hide that from the list of arms that you can toggle between and things like that, because otherwise the game just kind of crashed. So that was a very fun and unique challenge.
I had a similar experience, not because I did the sprite work, but because on the CGs, I am, fortunately or unfortunately, a bit of a show-off. So Zoe and everybody would be like, okay, Mira, for the CG, we've only got, like, 2 alts, like, 2 different versions. Like, one with them, like, let's say smiling, and one with them, like, not smiling or something like that, right? And I would be like, I can do more than 2 alts for this. Because what I would do is I would replay that scene in the game just to kind of get a feel for like, okay, here's what the characters are doing. Here are the things that I absolutely need to illustrate. Here are the things that I don't. And usually I would get inspired and be like, oh, wouldn't it be really cute if I had like the characters doing this or doing that? And so that ended with me sifting through like a Clip Studio Paint file that had like so many different layers and alts that sometimes I would get a little confused. And sometimes I would send joke pictures to everybody of like Zoe. No, not Zoe. Felicia and Margaret with like 12 different arms, like looking like one of those like Buddha statues or whatever.
Mira has figured out a very distinct grift in that she can get me to write more game if she includes so much art that I said, like, well, I can't just have like us linger on this illustration for one line. I need to like write more story in order for like the players to look at this art more.
Yeah, Mice T is a feedback loop of just people enjoying the things they're working on and then trying to make a better thing because someone else did a cool thing and they want to jump off of it.
Katie, is it true that the entire reason that the story involves being able to turn into different things by adding different things to tea is because you made a joke on a stream by drawing Sylvia as a fox?
Okay, I think
it predated that.
Yeah, I think the tea turning you into different things based on what's in it predated that part, but
that was so I could turn Felix into a girl before we determined that they were trans.
Right. There was a stream that I was in. It was a multi-stream on Picardo, so I had a bunch of friends that I was drawing with, and I was like, okay, well, I am the only person in this group that's not drawing a furry character. So I'm like, okay, well, let's just give Sylvia some fox ears, and maybe I'll just draw over her face and give her like a little fox muzzle and a tail. And it's all a joke, right? It's just a joke. And everyone's like, oh man, new Sylvia TF confirmed. I'm like, no guys, it's just a joke. And they're like, yeah, sure it is. And then What's Up, one of the developers for Changeling Tale, is just like, you have to put that in the game, right? Anything that you do is now canon. I'm just like, are you that? But and he's like, just do it.
No,
people aren't going to get upset by this cute fox lady in our furry game. Put her in.
I think
they'll riot.
Here's a situation where you posted an image and we're just like, holy fuck, where are we putting that in the game?
So, yeah, that sort of like steamrolled into like, oh well, then that's going to be totally what she turns into in this path, or this is how they test out the tea alchemy, things like that, and yeah, it was just a really silly, like if it is probably a good example of like one of the silliest little events turning like into a lot of content.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And I guess then, because you had to do all this art, I imagine at some points you might have run into any sort of art block or stuff like that. If you did, how did you push through it?
I am how do I say this? Whereas Mira is the admirable workhorse of just churning through content like no tomorrow, I am very much a person who unfortunately has a lot of, like, I have long periods of I don't want to touch anything, and then I have periods of I am going to just knock out as much as I can. And I know that probably that has created some stress for not only me but for some of the team members in the past, and I don't mean to air that out on here. I'm just saying that that's sort of how I work, and unfortunately there were times where I'm just like I can't do this right now, or like I am not in the headspace, and getting through that is like the way I got through that was mostly time, but also mostly just having like really supportive friends. Not like the team is amazing. I love the team. They're very supportive, but I also have some other friends outside of them that are just really, really supportive, and I'm very lucky to have them. They help keep me through it.
Katie does not give himself enough credit because the only reason I can workhorse like I do is because I'm lucky enough, thanks to my patrons and thanks to this job and to everybody who supported me, that I can do this job full time. So like that's why I can just sit down for 12 hours and bang out a CG in like 1 to 3 days, is because this is my full-time job. Whereas KD has been doing this for way longer than I've been doing it, while also having to juggle like a day job. So KD's definitely, if anybody's the workhorse here, I would definitely say it's KD. I just have fucking privilege. I'm just lucky enough to be able to fucking sit down at my desk and draw boobies and get paid for it. So
Booby is good.
Going way back, you were talking about how the flight CG was your favorite because it was the first, and like, you know, when you said you wanted to do ahead of time. And I think maybe another reason is that was before I felt more confident in like reining you back on the bust size of characters. That has definitely become part of the process. Is you drawing it and me saying, okay, let me double check the character model for this. Okay, we might need to rein that back a little bit.
It was definitely Zoe is our federal movie inspector, and she keeps me honest. Make sure that I don't make the boobies too big. Although I did slip some past her. There's at least one CG where a character is a little more well endowed than they should be, but
yeah, we're gonna go back and redo that this month, so don't you worry.
Oh no. But as for burnout, on top of the other thing about it being, you know, this is my day job, and if I don't do my job, I don't get to eat. The other thing was I fucking love this game. I love this game so much, and I'm so excited to be a part of it, and I'm a show-off, so I have continuously been trying to show off for the rest of the team with the work that I've done, so that kind of helps, you know, motivate me to keep working. Was I really want to sneak in little Easter eggs and make them happy and make them, you know, enjoy this thing we're creating together. And yeah,
that's right. Sylvia and Portia shopping in the background is my desktop background now. I did not ask for this, but I have it now.
I woke up in the middle of the night, and my wonderful boyfriend, Transformister, who I love very much, was patient enough with me. I went vertical, and I sat up, and I was like, babe, I need to write something down. And he's like, got it. And he grabbed my phone, and I wrote down that Portia and Sylvia appear in the background of the CG that I was going to work on that week. And then I went back to bed.
Incredible.
One of the other things that was sort of a challenge in terms of art was that and this was sort of like something that also happened to coincide along with my professional work as well, was learning to let others do the work, or like relinquishing control over the work, I guess. I was very adamant at first, like, no, I can do all this stuff, I can, you know, it'll take some time, but I can eventually get it done. But it was really just sort of relieving to realize, like, okay, if we bring some other people on, like, we can, like UBF, who I feel like we should really talk about her a little bit. But you know, we bring her on to draw all the sex stuff, because I've never drawn a sex scene, and that was very intimidating. That the idea of having to do that, and then, you know, we'll bring Mira on to do all these CGs that I had no time for, and even help me to sketch up some of these NPC sprites that I was just, sometimes I would just be really stuck on, like, you know, what pose can I use that I haven't used, you know, 500 times already for this character, that just doesn't make them look like, you know, funnily enough, that makes them look very unique and not like a regular person. You know,
I can't believe this game has 24 distinct NPCs.
It's pretty incredible. I was curious as well then to ask, you know, obviously the transformational aspect plays a large part in the art shown. So what was the process behind deciding which elements of the TF to highlight for each character?
That came a lot back to the writing. Like I said, I really... I would replay that section of the game every time I start a new CG, which, by the way, was one of my favorite parts because I fucking love this game. And, you know, the writing work that Zoe and Gunzel and KD did for different parts really kind of cut my work out for me. But also, like Zoe said, sometimes I would add little extra stuff because I was just like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if this... and kind of accidentally made more work for them.
So, interrupt me if any of this is wrong, Zoe, but I don't think you've ever worked on a furry TF before this.
Nope, this was my first time making any sort of furry content whatsoever.
So, first of all, she was absolutely knocking it out of the park right out of the gate. But there were also some things where it's like, okay, well, for I think the Sylvia TF was one where it's like the initial Snake TF, we sort of had a lot of back and forth about like, what do we want? How do we want the transformation to sound like to the viewer as they're reading it? And I sort of said like, okay, well, the idea of like not so much having like a fusing of like human like floppy human skin and then having it grow scales like that maybe not be the most, like in my opinion, that's maybe not the most attractive thing. So like having the idea of like, yes, her legs are fusing together, but also she's growing the scales along with it to help sort of have that sort of feel to it.
Yeah, I think the first version I wrote is like it kind of became a tail before she got the scales, and Katie just and probably in a voice me like just told me like, no, nobody wants to like imagine like little floppy cone like toes flapping around until before they're a snake. I'm like, oh, okay, good point. I will switch the order of those.
Yep. There was also the I'm sure that you're aware of the wonderful term of tailsplosion. But that was one of the other things that we made sure that we could add as much as we could.
I appreciate the shit out of that. Thank you very much for including that.
The actual cut in of Margaret having her tail pop out of her pants in the Felicia path was actually one of the very first, like, I think when we started planning out on Trello, like halfway through the project, that was like one of the very first things we outlined as something to add to the game. But yet it was one of the last things that we added in one of the recent updates.
Like 2 months ago
or
something.
Yeah, and it was so cathartic to finally see it in the game, in the story. And I'm sure a lot of our readers appreciated it as well.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I was like, oh yeah, you can like vaguely see her tail like in the bottom left corner of the screen if you hide the text box. That is surely enough for us. It's like, yeah, no, I gotta draw it. Gotta draw more art.
I mean, the experience of becoming, you know, a furry character and growing out of your clothes is sort of like the allegory metaphor of, you know, shedding your humanity as a part of that. But also like there's the sexual aspect of it too, where it's like, gee, a tail like straining against a waistline and then exploding out sure does like have a lot of sexual you know, equivalencies to it that people are probably gonna really like. So we got to make sure to add that.
Yeah, boy, it sure would be a shame if we had someone have all kinds of outfits get ruined by their body getting larger in some areas in a future game.
Well, speaking of sex appeal with tailsplosions, you know, one of the things I will say is that one thing that I really liked in terms of how they fit together was the styles between the sprites and the more detailed sex scene backgrounds. Like, they're clearly very distinct from one another, but they fit together nicely. So I was curious as to how you navigated that process of having those very distinct styles and meshing them with one another.
So our artist that works on a lot of the intimate scenes, or I would say most of the intimate scenes, if not all, is UBF. We've been referring to her as UBF, but her full name is Ultra Bondage Fairy.
So you might guess where the Julie Root kink came from.
Yes. We sort of wanted to get someone who could also have sort of a cartoony style, but also like she was very much like, I will adapt to sort of like highlight the same features that you highlight in your art. So like the way that like Margaret's hair, and I guess like a lot of it is like, okay, like the way that the hair is drawn, the way that like Sylvia's like snake tail pattern works, and
maintaining silhouettes and stuff.
Yeah. Just making sure that all like the consistency across the character design was there was a huge part of it. And I mean, UBF does super excellent work, and it was a real joy working with her to do that. Unfortunately, she's not one to talk. Unfortunately, so she can't be here.
Yeah, no, that's
And
fair.
she's in Australia, so time.
And she's in Australia. There's that.
Yeah, the time zones
But-
are a bit of a challenge, so that's fair.
But we very much appreciate her, and like her style is very much a compliment to the game.
And it is very distinct from Katie's and Mira's style. But I think the intimate scenes in the game are kind of like so kind of self-contained that it kind of makes sense for them to kind of like slip into a different sort of artistic register or kind of tone to them. So, like since those scenes are so set apart, and even like, something that you can be warned about ahead of time or skip if you need to, since they're so kind of self-contained, it didn't feel like too much of a jarring change in style for them to slip into that kind of more painterly, softer look that UBF uses.
The RPG battles of Mice T.
There you go.
Where it's now now there's 3D models and people are walking around.
And that's exactly where like the consistency of the design part comes in, of just like making sure that we can all render these characters in different styles, but make sure that the details are all there.
Margaret has her glasses.
That is something, I don't know why, but we always forget that. Like, we draw, and then 2 months later, we're like, oh, wait, we forgot to put whiskers on here. Boink. And just stick it on.
Yeah. Several Trello cards with a checklist of 8 different CGs where you need to add whiskers to them.
Beautiful. So then I will have to ask the question, what was your favorite part of the visual novel to illustrate?
You go first, Mira.
I definitely I stand by saying the flying scene. And Katie did a lot of the heavy lifting for that one to begin with. So I feel like I can't take a lot of credit for that one, because there was at the time that I played the game, there was a sketch. There was it was one of the sketches that was in the early access version that basically showed me what I needed to do. And then my insatiable desire to show off took over, and I just kind of wanted to capture that thrill and exhilaration of flying, because I feel like a lot of stories that explore flying don't give it the proper respect that it deserves, like the euphoria of being up in the clouds, but Mice T does, so I wanted to capture that visually. And I also want to thank you for asking that question, because before we went on, I went through all of the CGs I made for this game, and it was a really nice, nostalgic walk down. I know it's only been a year, but still, it was a nice walk down memory lane and seeing all of these moments. And I wanted to say a cop-out and say, like, all of them, but it's honest to God true. I fucking loved every single scrap that I worked on this, and there's so many things that I could just gush about getting to draw and being lucky enough to draw, but the first one's definitely gonna be a special part of my heart, is that flight.
If I can talk a little bit about like you showing off, I think maybe the kind of most prevalent example of that is there's a gender transformation in the game, and we do it kind of like panel style, right? So like we focus on this feature and it changes, and we focus on this feature and it changes. It's not like the kind of like person on a white background standing up and going from stage to stage. So we did this panel system, and we thought, okay, like they'll change here a little bit, and then like we'll move on to the next feature, and we kept that framing, but all the frames change as it goes along. So like there's the hair growth panel there, and then that is also reflected on the earlier panel, and that just keeps going throughout the whole sequence. So like instead of like only illustrating each change in that specific panel, they are then like retroactively attributed to the previous panels. It's crazy.
So first of all, Mira, you flatter me. That I very much did like the sketch that I gave you for the flying scene, and I'm glad you turned it into what it did, because it was a very much an upgrade, or like it was very much what I had imagined it to be, and more. So one of my favorite things to do for this game, I alluded to it before, but if I would pick like the one like sexy thing, I guess it would be the TF that occurs between, I think it's on day 5 of Julie's route. And spoiler warning, they turn into cows, and that, yes, milk and lactation is one of my fetishes. Breast expansion. I think cows are really cute. And I really like, that's one of the very few scenes that I had like almost complete control over, where how the and again, like that was another thing where like I'm going back and forth with Zoe about like, what sort of points to hit, and how the transformation would work. And I really enjoyed working on that whole sequence. I completely finished that one up recently along with Mira, who shaded it. And it was really fulfilling to see that come into the game, and well, to see that like absolutely finished in the game. And there were some extra parts that I added in as well, because like Mira, there are some times where I'm like, okay, I need to add this as well. Most of the time that occurs in like, adding a little extra expression or something in the sprites or an extra little detail. But sometimes it occurred in the CGs as well. The one like non-horny thing, I guess, that I really loved to illustrate was, again, spoilers, the final scene with Margaret and Gavin in their route. Just the 2 different versions of that, the wedding scene. I really enjoyed drawing like 2 characters that are just in love with each other, and how how absolutely cute it is when she's tiny and Julie is holding her up and like crying in the second panel where she's kissing Gavin on the beak. It's just
and then the music is like a melding of like both character themes along with like wedding music, and it just like brings it to another level.
Oh yeah, we've got this whole podcast without mentioning Will Bowerman, who is our composer, who maybe knocked it out of the park. Everybody keeps mentioning that, like, that is like when everybody does a positive review of the game, their last sentence is always like, oh, and the music is fantastic.
Yeah. A guy I met on the somethingawful.com game forums when I was doing a game jam in like 2015, 2014, and he's like, if anybody makes a game and their music was bad, I'm going to be mad at you because you didn't DM me and ask me for music. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And then he just made music for games that I worked on for game jams for like 4 or 5 years. And I'm like, hey, I'm making a porn game. You want to make music for it? He's like, yeah, sure. Okay. And then just did the whole soundtrack. And it was awesome.
Shout out to the "Oh My God, Julie" song. It sounds like it's out of like a Persona game, and I love that. And it was just 11 out of 10.
Good.
I loved it.
Sorry, that's also my favorite song in the whole game. So I'm right there with you.
A woman of taste. I appreciate that.
The sort of vibes that we gave him to reference as sort of like what we want was like lo-fi, Persona-esque, like jazz
with a bossa nova flavor for Margaret, of course.
Yes. And the funniest part is that he's actually never played Persona.
Oh my god!
At least not Persona 5. So the idea that like, and I had never played Persona 5 until like maybe like 6 months ago, and even I was like humming the Julie song in my head and thinking like, oh yeah, this is just Persona 5 music, and then I realized like, no, that's a piece of music for the game that I helped make. Holy shit.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. I had no idea that he hadn't played those games.
I find myself humming the main theme, Margaret's theme. I forget the exact name for it. I'm so sorry, Will. But Margaret's theme.
Theme for a mousy girl.
Brewing tea.
Yeah, theme for a mousy girl.
Yeah, that. Theme for a mousy girl. I find myself humming that to myself while I'm brewing tea in the morning. And I just... God, Will did such a good fucking job.
Yeah. My review of the soundtrack is sometimes I don't mute the game while developing the game. And I have worked on this game for hundreds of hundreds of hours.
Also, he's a true member of the development team because all of the song titles are horrendous puns.
They're great. Yeah. Oh, I love them. They're great. Oh my gosh. Well, that was all of the questions that I had, and we have covered, I think, pretty much everything, which is fantastic. And I really appreciate the time that y'all have shared with me. I don't know if you had any questions for me before we close out.
Gosh, I don't know. I do feel very excited that like the groundwork was laid for that parrot pun that got picked up before the TF even started. So I'm glad that the research worked in that case.
Hearing that the references landed with a person of Brazilian heritage is
they
nice.
do. Yeah, no, they really did, and I was really thrilled.
We got your favorite song.
Yes.
But what was your favorite TF?
Oh, what was my favorite TF?
Yeah.
If I had to pick one,
It's hard,
okay.
right?
I am going. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
Now you're on the hot seat.
Yeah, now I'm on the hot seat. Okay, if I had to pick a favorite TF that was like a major part of the story, I would probably go with Julie's. If I had to just pick like a favorite TF just out of like personal preference, I really loved Tharkus's TF, and I will leave that up for people because that one was very good. I really enjoyed that one.
I loved drawing Tharkus's sprite. It's so like Tharkus is already so goddamn cute.
Yes,
but I really enjoyed just like turning it up to 11. We also have just like so many little like meme expressions that we put on our face at the end that unfortunately never made it into the game, but some of it like she's very sassy and very fun.
It's great. I would have to say that was one of my personal favorites. So
Oh, I also forgot if you said you had a favorite joke that appeared in the game.
I mean, honestly, it was probably the drunk one. The like, you drunk idiot, like what are you doing, like with the tea bags? That was probably my favorite.
It's like weirdly meta, but also like how one might berate oneself while drunk.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, it very
like
much landed.
A brief moment of lucidity.
For that scene, I always made sure that like Margaret was always actually speaking out loud. We never use her like think dialogue type in that scene. No, she is literally just talking to herself that whole time out loud.
What would you say your favorite route was? An even harder question, probably. Like, just on the whole.
Okay. Actually, I will say my favorite route was the Sylvia route.
Nice.
I just... and it was funny because that was my first route, too. So maybe... I don't know if that was, like, part of it, but that one was definitely my favorite route. Sylvia ending up as a therapist was, like, 11 out of 10. I was very, very happy with that ending, so...
I wanted to sort of piggyback off of that. What was your first impression of Sylvia?
I was like not a fan. I was like, oh, who is this? What is this? And then in the back of my mind, I was also like, damn, this bass line in the song, I love it. But also I was like, oh, I don't like her, blah, blah, blah. And then, did a 180 by the end of it. So
that is a big meme in our community is like, Sylvia like starts out as like, oh, who's this bitch? Fuck her.
Yeah.
What a terrible person. And then by the end, you're like, Sylvia is a precious angel that I want to hug and hold and never let anything bad ever happen to her.
I want to protect her. I want to tell all my friends about her.
Yeah. I love her. I just, but yeah, like initially I was like, I love this theme of hers, but also, so.
Also, in the connection to Sylvia, very loosely, this tenuous connection. What was your favorite outfit in the game?
Oh my gosh!
I'm indulging myself.
Yeah,
because I had
absolutely.
to draw them all.
No, you did have to draw them all. Okay.
I had the privilege of drawing them all.
Yes.
And I had the privilege of looking at them.
I will have to say that the dress that Sylvia wears during the Julie route was probably my favorite, but specifically because you also had to draw it ripped, and that made me laugh. So
that's a good choice.
Yeah, Very good. Very, very good.
Another specific interest that made it into the game. That dress was ripped because we needed it to be
It's
ripped.
fair.
All
I
needed
support
that.
Oh, amazing. Well, again, thank you so much for spending all this time with me. I really appreciate it. And if folks are looking for you online, where can they find you? And of course, where can they find the game?
Well, you can find us at cinnamonswitch.com. That has links to all the kind of relevant places you can find us. It has our itch.io page where you can buy the game. It has our Steam page where you can wishlist the game. Also our Twitter and Discord. On Twitter, we're CinSwitch, C-I-N, Switch, as in Cinnamon Switch. There's also a big, giant gallery of fan art that's on there for you to peruse through. A lot of spoilers, but so is this podcast, so you're prepared for them. It's for sale right now on itch.io for $20. We also still have our Patreon if you feel like just throwing us extra money, but right now we're just kind of focusing on the actual release of the game. And
give out stickers if you give us $10 a month.
If you want little chibis of the characters, you can get on our Patreon and get those in the mail. Like the Patreon will be supporting our next project that we've alluded to a couple times. But otherwise, search for Mice T, and we had good enough SEO to appear at the top of the list when you search for that.
Amazing. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much to all of our listeners who are listening through this episode. I hope you had as much fun listening to it as I did recording it with our Cinnamon Switch crew. Looking forward to playing it over again, honestly, because I probably will play the game over again. I hope that everyone who's listening has a great week, keeps an open mind, and stays TFE. And we will see you all back here again next week. But until then, bye for now.